morning. Here are the cover of the book with the title Codicator the Rock Force Assault by Lieutenant General Edward M. Flanagan Jr. Who is Edward Flanagan Jr.? Edward Flanagan Jr. was born in South Jersey, New York on July 13, 1921. He was appointed to the United States Military Academy by the 27th District of New York on July 1, 1931. A Bachelor of Science degree from the United States Military Academy in 1943 and Master of Arts degree in Political Science from Boston University in 1960. Graduated from the Army War College in 1959, Armed Forces Staff College in 1955, United States Army Command and General Staff College in 1946, and the Air Command and Staff College in 1949. He completed Airborne School in 1943 and Artillery School in 1943 and 1951. In 1978 and 1984, he became a businessman manager with the Dowling law firm. He married on December 26, 1945 to Margaret Farrell. They have 5 children. He died on November 7, 2019 at the age of 98. The book that he written are Corregidor the Rock Force Assault in 2012, Angels at Dawn, The Los Baños Raid in 2022, Airborne, A Combat History of American Airborne Forces in 2023, The Lakasan, The Combat History of the 1807th Airborne Infantry in 1997, The Angels of a History of the 11th Airborne Division in 1989, Lighting the 101st in the Gulf War 1994, Before the Battle, A Common Sense Guide to Leadership and Management 1985, Battle for Panama, Inside Operation Just Cause 1993. Edward Flanagan have an awards and decoration like South Vietnamese Flagger, Army Staff Identification Badge, Master Parachute Badge, South Vietnam Master Parachutist Badge, South Vietnam Armor Badge, and so on. Rock for Assault. In early 1945, American Airborne troops swiftly captured the forestry and corregidor in Manila Bay with coordinated operation. And then, facing to General MacArthur on his return to the main island of Luzon, was captured the tiny island of Corregidor. Manila could be taken with conventional ground forces for aided, but both armor and artillery Corregidor, nicknamed Duran, would be harder not to crack. Kumbaga, yung Corregidor pinangalanan ng Durak or binansagan Durak. Tapos in 1942 ay Durak. Tapos dito yung yung only dalawang miles of the southern tip of Bataan Peninsula at the 16 miles wide entire Manila Bay. Yung the largest caliber guns on the island could devastate any ship going into or out of Manila Harbor. Yung shape ng Corregidor is like a giant tugpole and bulbous head measured roughly 1.5 miles from the side to side and faced almost due west toward South China Sea. 1942 when the Japanese invaded the Philippines, MacArthur was more than familiar with the defensive capabilities of the corregidor. The three regions of Corregidor was broken into three geographical regions: bottom side, middle side, and top side. Bottom side, it begins the rock of the island where the head connected to the tail, and then is word containing of all the tail section. Middle side, known as area of Corregidor just west San Jose, where the ground began using toward top side. Top side held the brick headquarters building numerous brick and mortar miles long barracks building, a parade ground, and a 9-hole golf course. And nakapaloob din dito na east of San Jose was a huge dimple of land known as Marinta Hill. Top Marin cut into the hill was Marinta Tunnel, which ran straight in for 1,400 feet with perpendicular tunnels running off the main line. Tapos tong tunnels na to built years before pagkatapos ng war. Nagko-contain yung underground dito bilang headquarters, hospital, maze area, and power generator, living quarters, and quartermaster. Habang etong panahon na to, yung corregidor, si General MacArthur's dito, may bahay dito, pati yung mga staff members niya, as kasama yung kanyang asawa, pati yung son and son niya, pati yung nursemaid inside the relative safety of the thick bomb-proof tunnel complex. Yan. Tapos yung corregidor nga tinawag na bilang middle side ay area of corregidor ng San Jose. Ito naman yung nagko-consist ng maliit na plateau to hold the officer and ENCO family quarters, as well as a small hospital, high school, and service club. Tapos in few hundred yards, the plateau was topside, the pinnacle of corregidors. Tapos ito nga, kaya siya tinawag na, kaya nga ito yung nag-held ng bricks quarter building. Tapos nyo is gan. Tapos ito 1898 dito yung Spanish sumunod sa Americans dahil hanggang ma-remain nila ng American yung it remained in American hands until May 5, 1942, when it finally surrendered to the Japanese during their conquest of the Philippines. Assault by the air. 1945, ayon kay MacArthur and sa kanyang mga forces na sila ay pupunta na or lilipat na Maynila, at yung corregidor ay magiging crucial. More than tapos yung corregidor, they dominate the entrance to Manila Bay. Tapos yung the Japanese has gone the islands prevented the Americans from bringing in ships to supply or support ground forces driving on the city work. Tapos 900 of Japanese soldiers was working with intelligence. And dito si MacArthur, he chose General Walter Kruger and 6th Army to recapture the Rock. Pinili ni MacArthur na si General Walker kasama yung 6 na army niya para recapture yung Rock. Tapos si Kruger nagbigay ng 3 choices. Tapos isa dito yung seize corregidor with a parachute drop with an ambitious landing or with both, knowing that a parachute drop by itself would be too risky and alone amphibious assault would to be costly. The Japan, tapos isa dito in May 1942, yung Japanese had staged an ambitious assault against a half-starved American garrison. Ayan. Tapos, sa invention ni Kruger, the main assault would come from the air. Kruger to drop 503 parachute regimental combat team on the topside seas. Ayan. Tapos, the 503rd PRCT, March 10, 1942, activated the Villain, Georgia. 503rd had been the first patroopers sent to the Pacific, arriving in Australia November 1942. Tapos, almost a year later, the 503rd became the first American patroopers to be drafted into a combat in the Pacific, using an airstrip at Nadsab near Lae during General MacArthur drive along the northern coast of New Guinea. Tapos, noong July 3 and 4, 1944, 1st and 3rd Battalions were dropped into the island of New Import near the northwestern end of New Guinea in conjunction with an amphibious landing by the 158th Regimental Combat Team. July 5 had been formulated to drop the 2nd Battalion. Miscalculation with the altimeters on the lead C-47 drop plane had caused the men from the first 2 battalions to drop from on 125 to 150 feet onto the hard coral surface of a Japanese airfield runway. On July 9, almost 9% to jump casualties to jump injuries the loss one of battalion commander, 3 company commanders, the regimental communication office, the regimental surgeon, and numerous non-commissioned officers. The 2nd Battalion was brought over the island by landing craft. Sa kalagitnaan ng September, Company C of 161st Airborne Engineering Battalion and the 462 Parachute Field Artillery Battalion had been attached to the paratroopers, bringing the 503rd up to the capacity of the full regimental combat team. On November 11, the entire unit had been moved to Leyte Island and placed to reserve during MacArthur's return to the Philippines. Since December 1944, the paratroopers had been sending out long-range reconnaissance patrols around Mindoro, with very little to show for their efforts. February 5, 1945, morale soared when Colonel George M. Jones was notified that regimental combat team was about to make another combat jump this time onto corridor. Planning the jump, which is the margin of safety, was February 16. The jump was scheduled, and the next 11 days, Colonel Jones and his staff had to do much. And tapos noong February 6, Jones made a aerial reconnaissance flight over the corridor with a group of low-level bombers to get good look at his target. Upon to return to his base, he contacted General Kruger and picked kindly field and corridor's tail for his drop. He was immediately overhead. Tapos yan, si Kruger wanted the troopers dropped on top side so that they would have been advantage of the high ground for the support of ambitious landing. Corridor's parade in ground measured 325 yards long and 250 yards wide, and the golf course was roughly 350 yards long and 185 yards wide. Both areas were surrounded by tangled undergrowth that had sprung up since 1942 by trees shattered during air naval bombardments and recruit buildings. Colonel Jones and his staff had to figure the prevailing winds over the Manila Bay, calculate the correct speed and direction of approach from the C-47s, and determine the optimal jump altitude. And was discovered that the winds over the topside generally came from the east and blew between 15 to 25 miles per hour. Planners knew route historian Robert Roos estimate that they were violating the theory to get the maximum force on the ground and the minimum, but there was no choice. The terrain and meteorological conditions played their share in the formulation of the plan. Lack of troop carrying aircraft and pilots trained for parachute operation did the rest. The margin of safety was practically. Doc Bradford expressed his doubts to Major Ernest C. Clark, Jr. of Regimental Headquarters. The Major replied, "That's the beauty of it. The Japs will never expect it because it looks impossible. No army in this war has pulled anything like it." Three drops. Drawing up his plan for actual assault, Jones decided that since he only had a small number of C-47s to work with, and since the drop zones were so small that he would have to bring the paratroopers in via 3 lifts. 2 lifts of come and on the first day of February 16 and the last day of February 17. Tapos all planes would be taking off from Elmore and Hill airstrips near San Jose on Mindoro to fly the 140 miles to corridor flight of about 1 hour and 15 minutes. According to Jones' plan, the first group would jump at 8:30 a.m. from 51 C-47s and consist the Air 3rd Battalion, Lieutenant Jet Erickson commanding the staff. preparing for assault. To prepare the area for the paratroopers and try to eliminate as many Japanese defenders as they before, the actual drop planes from the 5th and 13th Air Force had begun pounding the corridor on daily basis. Since January 22, on February 13, with just 3 to go US, the Japanese on corridor returned far from their big guns, however, and managed to damage 2 destroyers and minesweeper in response to attacks. Move inland, the reinforced combat team of the 34th Infantry Regiment, 24th Division was brought ashore and moved inland. The reinforced combat team 34th Infantry in preparation of for its ambitious attack on corridors the next morning. By the evening of February 15, all the paratroopers were eager and ready to go. Smith as an assistant operation officers of the everyone wanted to get to show and to have the spirit rate down to command of General MacArthur to the deployment sailors. The 3 minutes behind schedule. 3rd Battalion's troopers were awakened 5 a.m. on February 16 and given hour to eat, gather their gear, and board their assigned trucks. After the trucks reached either Elmore or Herfield, the men supplied go to truck look the corresponding number on one of the C-47s and then the line up in preparation for the call or climb upward first class Chester. We had just ourselves to rough landing on the parade ground. As planned, only seven others men flown Erickson out of the plane. Sa plano, yung 7th men sumunod kay Erickson to plane number 1. Tapos bago yon yung CP-47 nag-save sila ng drop area. Tapos tawag dito yung 550 feet ayun yung high jump altitude tapos yung wind blowing exists to 25 miles per hour yun. Tapos yung 500 foot high, ito yung toward step to clip the leads down of the waters Manila Bay. Tapos yung next plane was only 500 yards behind the copying and at speed of 100 miles per hour yun. Tapos instantly to Jones, he was on the radio to telling the pilots to drop an altitude of 400 feet and shorten the number of men in stick from 8 to 5 or 6. Unfortunately, the 3-week aerial bombardment and prevention bombing and selling had turned possible. Killing the Japanese, the parade ground area was littered with used chunks of concrete and jagged tree limbs. The smallest 9-hole golf course turned out a better place than land we jumped. About the 400 feet admit PFC Reynaldo Rodriguez. I believe this was of the lowest level combat jumps made by the U.S. troops and parachute World War. One of the first men jump onto the golf course was Captain Logan W. Hobbs, the sergeant of the 3rd Battalion who was in the first stick of the second plane. In time, his canopies unshattered, but Doc Hobbs and became so tangled in his parachute lines that he could not move. Eventually, First Lieutenant D. Sealer found him and got him out of the cocoon. Ganun. As turned out, Doc Howie's experts would find more than enough work to do the next few days. The other 3rd Battalion Sergeant Captain Norbert R. McKnight severely fractured an ankle upon landing and was fainted by the enemy fire from some behind a fallen tree. After rescue, the injured McKnight was evacuated from the Career Brigade. Yung strong winds blew 25 patroopers company. I passed the call and about 30 yards to the patroopers to the southeast of the side and 200 feet down the cliff face near a small promontory named Brickwater. Springing action accompanied paratroopers fired their rifles and threw hand grenades at the Japanese assemblage, unknowing they had just killed the Japanese commander on corridor, Captain Akira Itagaki, who had failed to fortify topside against airborne assault on the beliefs that such as attack was impossible. Taking enemy fire. After the first few dozens, transport planes made their first pass over both parade ground and golf course. They began taking ground for the Japanese. Job zone at the parade ground was less than ideal. One ground crew battled a 406 seconds parachute filled other battalion got lucky. We were most fortunate and jumped to PC which just our occupant landed in the exactly center of the Jones. Colonel just recalled the history of missing artillery. Major Atlas, the commanding officers of the Field Artillery Battalion, have most memorable descents. Captain Emmett Spicer, a doctor, member of the 47th Parachute Field Artillery Battalion, awardees Autonomous Silver Star Salute in part. Sergeant John Paul Hanson, trooper to win the Silver Star. The live were later used to silence Japanese aircraft, which threatened jumping in the archulans. Parang yung si Captain Emmett Spicer, siya yung parang buwis buhay yung ginawa niya. Tapos yun. Babasay ko lang. Colonel Jones rock for assaults 9:40 a.m. with most of the C-47s having circled 3 or 4 times to empty their loads. Colonel Jones decided to leave his own C-47 and his men on the rock. 9:50 a.m. All of the men, John and the escorts plans were winging their way back to Mindoro to pick their second sticks. The islands of Corregidor was still taking a pounding from warship and aircraft as the landing barge carrying the 3rd Battalion of the 34th Infantry Division meeting landing beach at sunset. 10 in spite of his injury, the reign of Ocampo, the Colonel had his regimental combat set as the dissipated mile long in the barracks building on the north side of the parade ground.